I am Audrey Johnson, and this is On the Couch with Audrey J. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Jacqui Thompson, Ruth Arzate, and Lisa Chamblee.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Robinson, I think he had told me to get ready, or maybe it was Morris. I think it was Morris. It was one of them. They told me to get ready to work at Paisley. And I was like, what does that mean? Because I didn't know that they were fixing it up. And then eventually I got hired to be the staff engineer, the local staff engineer. But yeah, they told me to get ready. And with that, I started listening to all the music that I knew that influenced Prince.
What made you do that?
They told me to get ready. So to me, what does that mean? Like, how do you get ready to work for Prince? Mm-hmm. But really, they told me a lot of things. Like, they told me, like, oh, he can smell fear. Like, don't ever be afraid because he can smell fear. I know.
It's so true. Oh, my God.
I know. They told me so many good things. I was so prepared because when I got there, I was like, okay, what's up, homie? Like, let's do this. Like, so fearless.
Although you didn't breathe for a moment. I remember you
the first time we were recording. Yeah, because I had told you, I can't tell the whole full story. I feel like I can't tell the whole full story, but yeah, the first time I recorded with him, I was holding my breath. I was a little nervous, but then the circumstances changed and we had a great session.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you guys this. It's a two-part question. What were your first thoughts when you came on board, and what do you think prepared you in your past to get you ready for that sort of an environment? And how did you do it? Like, how did you cope?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, I'm going to start with the second one first. To get prepped, actually, it was working for my mother. She had a business for 20 years and she ran it, had about 10 hairstylists, and I was the receptionist for her shop. And dealing with all these hairdressers.
You're the traffic cop.
I was the traffic cop, but I was also the one that got it if I messed up, like in a serious way. And so you learned how to deal with all these different personalities early on. You learned to deal with customers that were calling in. You had to deal with just all these different things. And my mother was teaching me about entrepreneurship and she was a great, model for that. And just how she dealt with her staff, how she dealt with everything was a big influence in my life. And she was a very big part of it. So that's the first part. I'm going to go back to what Lisa was saying. I was prepped over time, because I was friends with all the band members. Morris prepped me, not that I knew I was going to be there, but they would tell me stories. So those stories were my prep to understanding how to navigate him a bit just by hearing them and just listening. And then, from Morris Hayes to Mike Scott to, just everybody out there, Tom Tucker, Jack Robinson, all of, everybody was just, would tell these stories. And so I was kind of prepped in advance of working there. And that was almost the reason why I didn't want to work there. My mother really kind of talked me into it. Because I was going to turn it down, after Mike had called me. Cause I just was like, I really knew what I was going to, unlike Ruth, I knew what I was going to get into. I had heard the stories, boy. And so I was kind of prepped. So when I decided to go and jump into that, my first, everybody Morris was like, and everybody's just like, just stay under the radar. if he doesn't know your name, you're not going to like get crossed off and get fired. Right. So just like kind of stay under the radar for a little bit. So shoot, that first month and a half, man, I ducked. I was like, I'd go into the office, I'd work with Mike Tay and, stay out of the fray. And then they said, once he knows your name, it's on. And that day that I got that purse, I was walking by and I heard, Jacqui. I was like, in my head, I was like, oh shit, it's on.
Yep. It was when if he knows your name. Yep.
Yeah. It's on, you registered at his energy level or something going on. Cause then I was like, inside I was like, he said my name. Holy shit. My days are numbered. I'm counting the days right now.
Countdown begins.
Anyway.
And Ruth, how did you prepare for that environment? How did you cope with it?
Well, I think I did not have the prep stories that Jacqui and Lisa did, but my mother does share the same birthday as Prince, and their personalities are very, very similar. So except my mom was probably meaner and more violent. Had a very traumatizing childhood, and definitely less rich and talented. But my mom's erratic. My mom is borderline paranoid, schizophrenic, and so when you're dealing with someone who's a little, bipolar or whatever is going on with my mom, you quickly learn how to read the room and understand what is happening non-verbally. So there's a lot of nonverbal communication that you learn relatively quickly. Like I could tell what kind of mood my mom was the minute she stepped in the door. And so that was really important. I think it was a great framework for me and foundation to really build upon dealing with not just Prince, but honestly, I think Jacqui and Lisa can attest to this. The people around Prince were always much more toxic than he could ever be. And learning how to, as Jacqui said, how to maneuver those personalities around him is actually a bigger part of the game than actually dealing with Prince. Prince is, at least during my time, he wasn't, as vocal or as petulant as he seems to appear early in his career.
I know, Ruth, ours was kind of overlapped. Ours like the same time, like me in the studio and you were on everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa and I worked like a good chunk of time together, but we had different aspects of Prince. Sometimes we were in the same building together, but it was just different. It was very different. I feel like he was much different than from hearing and listening to other people's stories from the 80s. I feel like he probably matured more.
Yes,
but it was in there. It was in there though.
It definitely.
I mean, he still had his thing. You can't entirely change.
But it was not like
spots
that
on
before.
a leopard. But,
right. Yeah.
But I feel like he definitely matured.
Very much for me. From when I didn't know who that person was in the 80s because he wasn't that person with me.
Was he a JW when you were?
Yes, he had just I saw it from when he wasn't, and he just started, and he was through that my whole period, JW. But he definitely, even when I first started to, as my relationship with him grew, he became softer as a person. I saw it, and some of the things like the industry folks we would do a show like Leno, and they would be just like petrified of him, like the people at Leno, not petrified, but they were definitely very is he going to, Jay wants him to, do this and this. Is that going to be okay? It was their first time he had ever done Jay Leno. So it was very interesting to see that dynamic for what the industry felt about him and how he acted. And it's probably from the 80s, hangover of the 80s with, well, does he look you in the eye and all that? Well, when I was there, he wasn't that person. He looked you in the eye. He talked to you like straight up. He was like that with other people in the industry. It was like, for me, I was like, I don't even know who that person you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He wasn't the same. So for me, even though it was challenging and he could be challenging, it was a different kind of, he wasn't that hard, like, whatever the mystique had kind of built up with him over the years. He wasn't that to me.
Right. It just seemed like he was always evolving and changing mm-hmm. and growing. Absolutely. And
as humans do.
We all do that. Exactly. Right? People do that. And so, sometimes he was never allowed to do that, in the public eye. That wanted to kind of box him in.
I think that he had a different vibration with women too, especially the women who worked with him, worked for him,
Absolutely.
Worked with him. So the way that I coped with it, so for me, I would spend hours and hours and hours in the studio alone, making sure that I knew how to work everything, because I was in a position where mm-hmm. I had to perform just as much as he did. I had to make sure that it sounded right and it was recording his brilliance. Like he had mm-hmm. to get this music out, and it was my job to make sure that it got out like in the correct way, and that it was like creative, and that I wasn't blocking his creativity, because that was a big thing. Like if he wasn't vibing with you, you were not around him. You were just simply gone. Like get this person out. Why is this person here? Like that's literally, and then they're gone. So it's like I had to be very centered in who I was, but also allow for creativity, which is like, why I think that he liked female engineers, because we weren't trying to compete with him. We were collaborating. We're like in the spirit of creativity. We bring the muse. Here's the muse, So he was very respectful. And for me, that was how I could get through, like knowing all those stories like that I had heard from before. And I knew, well, if you are excellent, if you are on your excellence, you're going to be fine. So it was really just about being
that's
on
all
top
that
of your game.
It is. That's all he wanted you to do. He didn't want to hear no. He mm-hmm. wanted you to try, and and he wanted you to be excellent. And he would push you. And so as he pushed himself, because he wanted to be excellent. So I felt like honored. I didn't have a negative space. I mean, were there things that were like, I ended up leaving. I had to, because the energy, but I needed my life back too. But the thing is that he stays with me, in so many aspects of my life in what I do now, because I think it's like, I always like think of him as like, so not fearful. He didn't care what other people thought. He did it his way, the way he wanted to. And that's how I want to lead my life. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to be on that higher vibration. I want to, walk in that space and ultimately grow. And he was definitely on that journey, always trying to learn, always trying to grow, at least through my period of time, mm-hmm. So, for people to kind of, say he was this way, he's a different person in the 90s. He's a different person in the 2000s. He's a different 2000, you know what I mean? Like he's a different person, like who had Lisa, you had, and Ruth, you had. My experience were different. But, there's a theme still. I mean, there were still challenges for sure. But I do agree with you, Lisa, as far as like he had vibrations with women. I think he felt very comfortable with women, or more comfortable. And if you were either going to be there or you weren't, he either liked your vibe or you were done. That's all there was to it. And if you liked your vibe and you kept trying to be better and better and excellent, grow, then he was going to keep you around. So, I'm thankful to have worked for him. I'm thankful my mother pushed me into doing it, not gentle push, she just kind of made me think differently and go for it. And I'm so glad I did that.
Well, speaking of women and why Prince liked women more, he once told me, he said, he's like, do you know why I prefer women working around me? Actually, I think it was with a session after you, Lisa. Like, it was a good session. And he came into the office. This is at Paisley. He came into my office and he said, do you want to know why I prefer women working around me? And I was like, no, like, why are you here? Like, what's going on? Like, it was just random. He popped into my office before he went into his, and he said, because women have less egos than men, and I'm allowed to be creative without fighting them in the process. So that backs what Lisa just said.
Collaboration,
and then he said,
Absolutely.
and then he threw in some Egyptology for me. He's like, do you know why women? He's like, did you know that most scribes in ancient Egypt and during biblical times did you know that they were women? And I was like, no, I did not know they were women. And he's like, do you know why that is? And I said, no. And he said, because they're able to absorb the information and put it down as it is, as opposed to what they think it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they didn't talk to certain people. Oh no, Ruth, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay.
No, stay in the higher vibe, girl. Keep it up.
Jesus save me.
Okay.
I was just about to call out a past Prince associate who likes to speak for Prince, but never mind. We will not be throwing shade today.
That's very.
We're going to keep it at a higher level.
Yeah, we're going to keep it at a higher level. It always amazes me how anybody can speak for Prince. Or you just speak for yourself in your experiences.
Right.
So, you can't.
And give examples. So I just gave an example to back both you and Lisa.
And thank you for that story, Ruth. Because, that's very I wonder if that was the session after Satisfied. That song, Satisfied.
I know it was during that album.
Yeah.
I just don't know what session it was.
That was one of the sessions really I was happy. Like solo
he was really happy about what happened in the studio.
Yeah.
Memories. Best times of my life.
I know. It was interesting. I started working with him. I love that he would empower you to do more. I mean, he put a lot of pressure on you, but he really wanted to empower women, I think, very much so. He was definitely into the inclusion and diversity and, that type of thing. And, he started, on a creative side, we got to work together. I think he needed business creatives around. He used to tell me he just couldn't stand suits and lawyers and all that around him. He just didn't like, it wasn't his vibe. But as I got to know him, it felt like he really creative, business folks, that had creativity around them. And it was, and so I started doing, so it's such a trip these days because sometimes I see in the feed and I forget what, you do during that period of time because it was a whirlwind as Lisa and Ruth can attest. I don't remember half of the stuff sometimes. The fans know more, the people that, they know more about what I did than what I did. I started doing video cutting and it was just like you get thrown into these situations with him and you just you're going to sink or you're going to swim. And so you learn to, I'm a scrapper. I'm going to swim.
I always said that it's sink or swim while there's a lightning strike, while there's a lightning storm going on. That's what I
totally. Oh, it is and so you learn that, and I love that. That has really helped me through all the different things I've done in my career and future is that you learn to you learn more about yourself and that how much you can really do. than you ever thought,
that was kind of leading me to my next question. Like what were the hard lessons that you learned during that time and how has that shown up in your career now and moving forward, like what you're working towards now?
Well, for me, this is Jacqui. I feel like being pushed into directions you never thought you could do. It really is like opened up your mind, at least my mind, to the possibilities of able to do anything you want to do, and not be fearful. I always bring being fearful and not being fearful, fearless into my equation for me, in the perspective that my relationship with him, I just saw him dive into it. It didn't always work. It generally did with him, but once in a while, you're gonna not. It maybe didn't get to where it needed to be, but you tried it, and so that's what I've taken from some of that. Some of it, there's a lot more, but in work ethic, just working really hard and enjoying what you do and staying in the space of enjoyment. And if you don't enjoy what you do, then you need to move and to do something that you enjoy, and not be afraid to move. Not be afraid to try things and fail. And, but that's what I've taken from him, and that I carried through today. And I hear him like, you can do this shit. I guess we are at After Dark because we are accustomed on the couch, but that's how I feel. I feel like that, and also empowering as a woman. He empowered me to feel like I can hang with the big dogs,
Mm-hmm.
I can hang doing this stuff, and that I am a big dog, myself, so that's how I feel. And I carry this to, today for me.
Ruth, what about you?
So there's quite a bit. It's a very layered question. But I think probably one of the two biggest things that I learned from Prince is that always trust your instinct. Number one, and number two, once, like, if something isn't working, be okay to accept it as it is or let it go. And you can't control everything. And I feel, he had an insane work ethic, which I also have when I'm working for someone else, where I'm still learning and trying to keep up, is to implement that same kind of work ethic for myself. So I know Jacqui has that definite, really strong spirit of like entrepreneurism, and so does Lisa. And I'm a little more lackadaisical because I just don't have enough faith in my own stuff that I'm working on, but I'm getting there. And a lot of that has to do with, like, Prince didn't have to see, as Jacqui and Lisa know, he didn't have to see what you could do. He would just ask you to do something. He had no idea if you could do something or not. If it turns out you couldn't execute it, then he wouldn't ask you again. But he would ask you something else. Like, he never stopped. I know a lot of people will say, well, Prince believed in me. I think it was just Prince is like, just do it, because you can do anything if you put your mind to it. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's just not a Princeism. That's just generally what many people have said over the years. And scientists even, like, if you can see it, you can probably do it. If you can imagine a situation or a course for your life, you have to have a work behind the imagination, behind the thought. But as long as what you say, what you think, and what you do align, you can accomplish whatever that goal is. Mm-hmm. So I really feel like that, and understanding personalities and not to take it personally, is a big thing for all of us that work in the entertainment industry. You just have to, like, not take things personally, because it's never personal. It's really projection. It's about that other person. Yeah. And once you take it personal, you have to understand and examine why you're taking it personally. Mm-hmm. And that's your work. That's my personal work. That's Jacqui, every individual's work. for us to examine, why does this bother me? And then, there are injustices in the world that obviously should bother everyone. But then there's slights, or there's being overlooked or undermined or maligned. I'm actually dealing with a situation where someone is spewing misinformation about me. Not just misinformation, they're just actually toxic lies. And it bothered me for about a day or two. I don't know if it'll become public or not, but I'm in the middle of doing something, so I had to tell people that this potentially could come out. But what I let it sit for a day or two, because I don't really know this person. I don't know why they're doing whatever they're doing. And a saying that someone told me once long ago that their mother told them, which is that people will always talk about you. Just don't let it be true if it's negative, right? So I'm pretty consistent with my character and my integrity. At least I try to be. I'm not great always. I do and say things that are not always in alignment with the kind of person that I want to be. I actually made some apologies this week because I was feeling like, oh, that was a little toxic of you, you jerk. Because, I can be an asshole too. But I like to keep tabs on that because it's a skill set that can be learned. And I think as a society as a whole, with the way that social media is going into and the trajectory that it's taking us, we are more connected to our phones and our Twitter than we are with people. And so when you disconnect from a person, we look at each other and we don't take into consideration that we may have stuff going on, that we are all multi-layered people, not just Prince, and that we all have our closets that are stuffed full and maybe overflowing with things that we don't want to talk about. And it affects how we treat each other. And mental health is a really big issue. And the one thing that I think that actually helped me navigate is, I think Lisa and Jacqui were smarter than I was and were able to navigate out of the situation. But after working with Prince, I had a bit of a nervous breakdown. It wasn't necessarily his doing. He was a small part in a bigger thing that was at play. It was just a perfect storm of interpersonal situations. But, I was also under a lot of duress working with him during that time. And, and there were a lot of things that I learned in dealing with just individuals that were around him. And one of the other big things that I've learned working with Prince, and that definitely has transitioned over to my personal and professional life, is to hire slow and fire quick.
We've come to the end of part 2 of my interview with Jacqui, Ruth, and Lisa. Please subscribe, share with your friends, follow, so that you will be notified when part 3 of this trilogy is available. Thanks for joining us today on the couch.